Hi everyone, you welcome back to my channel. I'm Dushke Styles, and if this is your first time of coming across my channel, you're highly welcome. So in today's tutorial, I'll be quickly sharing with you all how to draft and sew a four-piece skirt, which you see right here on the screen, and it's basically one of the simplest skirts you can ever draft or sew. So all you need to do is to actually pay proper attention to every steps and details and process I'll be share with you right here in today's tutorial. So please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, also like this video. So without much ado, I'm just going to get started with what you have to. So just as I stated earlier, a four-piece skirt is basically one of the simplest skirts you can ever make. So here are the materials I'm working with. You can see I have my black lining, and I have this my Ankara piece. I actually have 2.5 yards of this Ankara piece right here, my pattern paper, and also my ruler. Okay, so the next thing I'll start is by drafting a basic skirt, okay, up to my knee length. So from the top of my paper, I'm going to mark a line across, and from there all my measurements will be starting from there, and that will be my waistline. Okay, so please do note that this 2.5 yards of fabric I'm working with will not really give a very full effect of this four-piece. So I will advise you to use about 4 yards to 3.5 yards of Ankara fabric if you want to achieve a very full effect on your four-piece. Okay, so the next thing is to divide my hip circumference by 4, and I'm going to mark what I got there on my waistline, right? The hip circumference by 4. So I'll be adding a band of 2 inches to this my skirt. Okay, so meaning that I have to subtract 2 inches from all the measurements I'll be taking right here. As you can see, I placed it exactly on my waistline. So I got my hip length of 9 inches and my knee length of 19 inches plus extra 1 inch for hemming. All right, so I'll go ahead now and extend all these points I made right here. So I'll just label that my hip line and also my knee line. So after that, I'm also going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4 on my hip line. So it was actually 9 3/4, but I marked 9.5, which I later corrected right there. Okay, so my hip circumference divided by 4 is actually 9 3/4, and so you can see that it went straight up to my hip line, right? There is nothing like curve right here. So on my knee line, sorry, I had to subtract just half of an inch from what I had on my hip line, and I marked it there on my knee line. So I'm actually making this skirt for a mother, and you know they don't really want all these things to be tight on them, right? So that is it, and I'm just going to go ahead now to cut this out. So if you look closely, this is actually looking straight, like just straight. Okay, so this is because I'll be fixing a rope to the waist of my skirt and not a zipper, right? So with this I've already drafted, I'm going to use it to cut out on my piece, and I also went ahead to indicate the center front and the side front as well. So here now is the fabric that I'm working with, which is 2.5 yards, and I already went ahead to fold it into two equal halves, making sure that the two borders align. So watch properly, you see right there the two borders align, like I folded it into two equally, as you can see right here. So I actually went ahead to take or measure out the length of this my skirt to make sure that the part where I folded will be up to my skirt length, right? So from that top part, I went ahead to start taking the measurements with my tape, as you can see. And when I measured this to this end, it was up to it, because normally we know by length an Ankara piece is usually 45 inches, but the other part will be longer. All right, but if I should fold the other side, is not really going to give me room for my extensions on my piece, on my skirt, right? So that is simply it. So just go ahead and measure the part that will be enough for a skirt. But I believe that this other side, which is 45 inches, will do the job perfectly for you. Okay, so I arranged this properly now on my table, and I'm just going to start marking 4 inches from the edge of my folded fabric. So these 4 inches I'm marking right here is because I'm managing this fabric. Okay, So if I was making this particular skirt with about 5 yards, I would have marked about 6 to 7 inches that will serve as my extension to give my piece a very full flare effect. Okay, so that 4 inches I marked from the folded edge of my fabric. I'm just going to also fold in about 4 inches from the edge of my from the top of my fabric. Sorry, this is because I am marking 4 inches because by the time I fold from the top of my fabric, I'm actually going to have 2 inches. So that 4 inches I marked right there, I went ahead to extend it or connect it into a straight line, and I'm simply going to fold, you can see, to get up to that line. So right here on fold now, what I have right there is 2 inches. I hope you understand. So I'll be having 2 inches after folding this inward this way. So I don't want to cut the band separately, I just want to fold in and also sew on it. So please just continue watching, you understand everything perfectly as we progress. Okay, so the 4 inches I marked from the folded edge of my fabric, like I said, it will be for my extension, because you need to indicate how many inches extension you'll be giving to your skirt. All right, and when you actually mark your extension, you need to also add extra half an inch, which will serve as the joining allowance to your skirt. All right, so now from that 4.5 inches I marked, I went ahead to start pinning this my pattern paper on my fabric. And if you watch closely, you realize that I have my center front, the part I labeled center front CF. I am pinning it exactly on that line. Okay, so please do ensure that you make this point to indicate your center front and your side front. Okay, and you can also see that I started pinning from beneath that fold. I placed my pattern paper beneath that fold I have from the top of my fabric. So I believe this is very clear enough and not confusing at all. So I'm pinning this down to hold it in place on my fabric so it doesn't shift or move, as you can see right here. So the next thing I'm simply going to do now is to mark half of an inch away from this my pattern paper. As you can see, I'm doing right here, I'm marking half inch away from it. So I'll mark it all the way to the very end of this my fabric. Right, so I will now use my stretch ruler to connect this all the way to the end of my fabric. So you can see that right there, I'm also marking that half of an inch at that point. So this is actually what is meant to be. And by the time I measure from the folded edge of my fabric, I'm also going to have 4 inches. And also on the side front, I'm also coming out by half of an inch this way, because this is going to serve as the joining allowance to the other sides of this skirt. All right, so after that, I also use my ruler to connect this. And at this point, if you actually have a very long ruler, this is when you need it. All right, so now from that my extension, at that point I'm going to measure out 4 inches. As you can see, I had 4 inches right there. So now I'm going to also do the same thing for the other side. I'll mark 4 inches right there on that point. So you can actually give this, like I said earlier, an extension of more than 4 inches, right? But because I'm managing this fabric, that was the reason why I'm marking 4 inches as my extension. So I went ahead to indicate the knee line so that I don't exceed that point, because I'll be connecting from these 4 inches I marked right here all the way to that knee line. So that was why I made that mark on my knee line, so that I will not exceed my knee line. So you can see how I slightly connected this up to my knee line. And if you watch closely, you realize that the marks I made right here stopped on that half of an inch I marked outward from my pattern paper. It didn't get up to my pattern paper. I hope everything I'm doing right here is clear enough. So this extension I made right here, this 4 inches extension I made right here, you can actually increase yours by extra inches, but it shouldn't be more than 7 to 8 inches. Okay, So it's all about preference, right? So the next thing is just to cut this out exactly the way I've already drafted right here on my fabric. So I'm going to cut out this side and also cut out the other side. All right. If I was to add extra inches to this my extension, I would have had a very full effect, but there's no cause for alarm because this is still the same procedure that you also take when you want to achieve a fuller effect on the downside of your skirt. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to get to that my knee line, and I'm going to notch that my knee line. I just measured out the length of my skirt, and that was the perfect length I needed, plus 1 inch for hemming, right? So I also notched my knee line to indicate my knee because it's meant to align with other parts of my skirt. Okay, so I'll also come to my center front and I'll give a notch only at the center front, so that when I see a notch at the upper part, I'll know that is my center front, and the notch beneath will be for my knee line. Okay, so when I'm joining this, you really understand the reason for all of these things I'm doing right here. So guys, this is what I have after drafting, and this is exactly the same thing that I will do for the other piece. So by the time I'll remove this my pattern paper, I'll be left with just 2 pieces of this skirt, right? So now I got the remaining the remnant of my fabric, and I'm going to place this properly and fold it into 2 as well, right? So I'm also going to replicate the same thing I did for the front. So like I said, I'm not adding a zipper to this skirt. It's actually a rope. I'm adding a rope to my skirt, right? So I went ahead to also pin and arrange the waist properly before I went ahead to also place this my pattern paper on it. At both sides on this pattern paper, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch outward, and I'll connect it all the way to the full length of this my fabric. Then I'll go ahead to also do the same thing I did for the front part, but let's just do this together, right? So I'm already marking the 1/2 inch away from my pattern paper on the center front, as you can see. And like I said earlier, make sure that the points or the arrows aligned, so the center front should be at the center front and the side front should be at the side front. So I'll also go ahead now to use my straight ruler to also connect those 1/2 inch points into a straight line up to the full length of this my fabric. So you just have to take your time to do all of this, all right? So I've given my extension on this my center front part, and I'm also going to rule out that part on my knee line because I'm going to stop exactly on my knee line. So like I said earlier, you have to stop on that 1/2 inch you marked away from your pattern paper. Okay, so your connection shouldn't get up to your pattern paper, as you can see I've done right here, because that 1/2 inch is actually for the joining to the other parts of our skirt. Okay, and also make sure that any extension that you mark for the front part of your skirt, you also mark the same extension for the back, because one extension is not meant to be bigger or longer than the other. For example, if I had marked 5 inches for my extension for the front part of my skirt, I cannot come here now and mark 4 inches for the back part of my skirt. So I'm supposed to mark the exact 4 inches for all the extensions I'll be creating right here on my skirt. Okay, just as I've done right here. So that is just it, and I'll go ahead now to cut this out. So now the next thing I'm going to do after cutting out this my skirt piece is actually to cut out my lining piece, right? By the time I'll be done cutting this out and also notching the knee line and also one part on the center front. All right, so I'll also do all of these things I'm explaining here on this video. Okay, So after this, now I'll go ahead now to remove this my pattern paper from this my fabric, and I'm going to get my lining piece. So this my lining piece, I'm going to fold it into two. Okay, so I'll fold it into two. I'm not going to alter the folded part. All right, so I'll fold this into two, and I place the front part of my skirt on top of this my lining piece, right? So the only part I'm going to cut off is the side and the base. I'm going to stop exactly on the knee length, on that knee line. So as you can see, I have two pieces of this. I didn't go ahead to separate this at the center, right? So the next thing now is to start joining all of these our skirt piece together. So this is for the front part, though you can't really differentiate the front from the back because they are actually of the same size and length and all of that, because no zipper was added to this skirt. If it was a zipper that was added to it, you would have been able to differentiate the back from the front because of the zip allowance, right? So you can see that at that point I made sure that that the notches I had at the upper parts indicated that this is my center front. Okay, so I placed them together right sides facing each other, and I'm going to make sure that also the notch I made on the knee line also aligns. So by the time I arranged this properly and I got exactly what I wanted, I went ahead now to pin all this from the upper part all the way to the end of this my fabric, and I'm marking that 1/2 inch, which I told you would be for the joining, right? So after marking it, I'm just going to stitch all the way like this to the end of my fabric. So I'll do it for the two parts of my skirt separately, and I'll show you what I have. So I've gone ahead to do this, and this is what I have, as you can see right here. So we're actually progressing, right? So I'm going to spread this out open like this, and the next thing I'm going to do now is to get my lining piece, which I've already gone ahead to hem on the knee part, right? So I've gone ahead to hem, as you can see right here. And so for this part I hemmed is going to be for the front, and the other side is going to be for the back part of my lining piece. Okay, so I now placed this my lining piece on top of my skirts like this on the waistline, and I'm just going to stitch that waist part using just 1/4 inch, just there, just 1/4 inch. I'll arrange it properly. So I've gone ahead to do this, and I flip this to the right side, and you can see what I have, and on the wrong side you can see what I have. So this my lining piece, I actually stitched my lining and my fabric together both sides using just 1/4 inch so that I can be able to hold them in place. Okay, so I did it for the two parts of this my skirt, as you can see right here. So the next thing now is to start joining the side of my skirt. So I'll do this by making sure I also arrange the front and the back part of my skirt properly, and pinning this as well first. That is the first thing you're supposed to do. Before now, I'll go ahead now to mark the 1/2 inch which I added for my joining allowance, all of this piece. So if you had noticed, this is a dartless skirt because the joinings we have right here have automatically served as the darts. Okay, so like this is basically one of the most simplest skirts you can ever make. Same thing with the 6-piece, 8-piece skirt and the rest of them, right? So guys, I've gone ahead now to join the two sides, and the next thing I'm going to do now is to fold the waist part of this my skirt. So like this, I'm going to fold this all around, but please make sure that you iron this properly and perfectly. Okay, so by the time I fold, I'm going to have about 2 inches. So that was why I gave that 4 inches initially, right? So I'm going to stitch at the tip of this fold I have right here, and I've gone ahead to do that, guys, and this is what I have. So for you to actually fix your rope, because you have to actually also cut out a very long piece which is like twice your waist circumference and also 1 inch wide, you fold it twice and also get your rope. So when I was stitching, I didn't really stitch everything all through. I left about 1 inch space, as you can see right there on my waist. So this my rope, I'll start passing it through from one side. So I actually had to cut out a little piece at the side of this my skirt, which my camera didn't really record. I don't really know the reason for that, but at one side of your skirt you're actually going to cut out a little piece like on the waist, more like creating a hole on the waist of your skirt. All right, so that was what I did, and from that part I didn't really stitch up entirely on my skirt. I passed this my rope through, and you can see on that point I have this little tiny hole I created at the side of my skirt. So I'm going to bring this out from that point. All right, so when I do this, I'll remove my safety pin, I'll pin it to the other end of my rope, and I'm also going to start passing this through from the other side, because this hole I created on my waist is actually 2. So just bring your on your waist, just make a tiny hole using your scissors by cutting out just a tiny piece, right? So this is what I did, as you can see right here. And the next thing I will do is to make sure that this rope fits in perfectly to my waist, and that remnant I have right there, I'm going to stitch it up at that point. And that is just that for your skirt. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also try this out. You can also hem the base of your skirt, or you can use a crinoline or your horse braid to do this. And while ironing, you should bring out your extensions this way and iron so that it can stand out perfectly. Thank you all so much for watching. See you all in my next one. Bye.